So you're the founder of Creme Digital. I think it was passing $250,000 a month in revenue.
Yeah, it's been a longer journey. I think we went from literally being a nobody in the space to, I would say, within a year of probably being within the top 3 agencies. I think people see the numbers and they see me kind of pop on the scene, and people assume I've been doing it for 3 months or something like that. But the reality is I've been at it for 4 or 5 years actually.
Let's start from the beginning, which is how did you get your first client and what did that look like?
I was really determined on not going to university. I think that you need some kind of external driving force, especially when you're starting. For me, that was how do I convince myself and convince my parents that I don't need to go to school?
And what was it like to build out that process in the early days?
The most important part of it is that...
All right, Jacob, welcome to the podcast, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So you're the founder of Creme Digital, which I just saw picked up some steam recently on Twitter for, I think it was passing $250,000 a month in revenue.
Yes, sir. That is me.
So I think the goal today is really to break down what it takes to build an agency, specifically on Lovable, because you built a no-code agency up to where it is today. Because I know you've only been working on this for, I think, a couple of years now.
Yeah. It's been a longer journey. I think recently I've had a little bit more momentum on Twitter. I think I've had a few posts go some viral. I've had some beefs that have been taken on Twitter, but. I think people see the numbers and they see me kind of pop on the scene, and people assume I've been doing it for 3 months or something like that. But the reality is I've been at it for 4 or 5 years actually. So these things don't actually happen overnight; they just appear like they do.
Awesome. So let's start from the beginning, which is how did you get your first client and what did that look like?
Yeah. So I mean, to kind of paint the picture a little bit more, I was really determined on not going to university. That was kind of the main fuel, honestly, of business when I first started, which was especially I think that you need some kind of external driving force, especially when you're starting, because everything is kind of thin air. And so for me, that was how do I convince myself and convince my parents that I don't need to go to school to kind of be successful. And so through high school, I started multiple different businesses. Everything from obviously the classics dropshipping, affiliate marketing, all that stuff, but also I would be doing real estate shoots 5 to 7 times a week, doing drones. Yeah, so it was really the true hustle, nice. In high school. Eventually, I came across kind of no code and Bubble, which is kind of where I got my start, and we started building no code web apps basically during the pandemic when businesses needed to go digital, given that obviously in person was kind of not a real thing. And so basically my start with the first few clients, I have a co-founder, and he has a solid network through Tony Robbins community and some kind of business owners that were in that. And so I would say the first couple came through that. But, that dries up really quickly, and you still need to kind of figure out how to actually build a business. That's not just hitting people up that you know. And so the next thing from that was Bubble RFPs, which are requests for proposals. So most of these Webflow, Bubble, most of these platforms have some form of RFPs, which is businesses can go and find agencies to work with.
It's basically bounties?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, you're competing against, different agencies or everyone's competing against different clients, right? So we got really good at that process. That probably drove the initial 7 figures in revenue, which was, I would say 80% RFPs. We just got really good at being the first to respond. We got really good at how to position ourselves. We brought in a sales team to kind of handle that. And so we went from literally being a nobody in the space to, I would say, within a year of probably being within the top 3 agencies, just because we were strategic around how we positioned ourselves opposed to different agencies that were already doing it.
What was so strategic about how you positioned yourself?
So I think that one of the mistakes that people make is that you kind of go into a market and you think okay, I'm just going to beat them on price, or I'm going to beat them on quality or whatever. But that's not people don't really care. In fact, I think if you're competing on price, you're playing a really tricky game, because ultimately that means that you're building something that's commoditized, which means that's kind of a race to the bottom. And so what we did is we were like, let's look at the market here. And what I observed was that Bubble was still like really early. No code was really early. This was before the whole no code boom. And I think it was 2021. So it really wasn't this thing that people were talking about. But what I observed was that people were building products, but they were super janky and they were super slow and they looked really bad. And so you could go work with an agency, but they were like a true Bubble dev agency. You know, like you had like these early adapters building on Bubble. And you could go, pay these agencies $5-10 grand, but you're going to get a product that looks like it's built on no code or built on Bubble, right? And so you're kind of paying for what you get. So our take was like, okay, if you're getting a product that's like not very good, it doesn't really matter if it's like half the cost and half the time. So our thing was like, well, how can we actually like get to a point where the product has longevity, it can scale and it looks nice, and so our take was, let's charge 2 to 3x what our competitors are charging, but let's build the most high-end service. Let's really care about design. Let's hire a whole design team. Let's hire developers that know how to be able to afford better developers because we charge more. And so we would win because people would see our work and they would see other people's works. And even though the price tag was much bigger, there was like this like emotional connection to when you think about it, like if people are building their idea, right? Like this idea that they've had in the back of their head and they're finally scraped enough money to get it together, which is like a lot of our early clients. If they see one product that's like kind of a janky looking thing and it's 10 grand and they see this shiny, beautiful thing that's 20 or 15 grand, they'll make it up in their head how to get to that, point. And so that's where we came in. And that's why we just kept winning. And I think it took people a really long time to catch up.
It's interesting because even when you talk about like traditional startup pricing and like thinking about where to price yourself on like a scale, the default answer for a lot of people seems to be, I can just beat people out on price because I'm a one-person team and, I'm going up against larger businesses. I've found that a lot of the time, the biggest unlock for a startup that like we've advised in the past is literally just charge more and take on less clients or try to take on less customers or don't focus on scale, just build up your case studies and build up, your reputation in the space. Because once the word of mouth starts flowing, or once you have people who are like customers but also champions for your product, it's a lot easier to go from 1 to 10 than it is to go from 0 to 10.
For sure. No, totally resonate with that. And yeah, so our approach was always like the exact opposite of like charge 2-3x and see what happens, and then pricing. My perspective on pricing is completely relative to who you're pitching. So it like you could quote for the exact same amount of work to a startup, and you could quote 10 grand, and you could go quote the exact same product to a Fortune 500 for 100,000.
No, you're right.
I mean, this is pretty well known, I think, in most established business owners. But I think when you're first starting, that idea sounds a little bit more foreign. But the reality is that people actually, in fact, like if you were to go to bigger companies and charge too low, then they're going to think
they won't take your
wrong.
Product seriously. Yeah, they won't take you seriously as a contender for who they should purchase from.
Because it needs to make sense in their mind, right? Like if they're going to spend, if you're working with a Fortune 500 and you're building them an internal tool that's going to have a 1% increase or in efficiency, like for them to spend $10,000 to do that, it sounds way too good to be true, because 1% in efficiency gains is going to make them like $10 million. I'm just making it up, but so 100 is to pay 250 grand for that sounds a lot more reasonable. It's kind of backwards, but it kind of makes sense.
Even like with Superhuman, the email tool, like they came out the gate charging $30 a month and created this new category of like luxury software. And they were one of the first to do it, I believe, at their time. And because, it was definitely a better product than Gmail. It was faster, it had a better UI, etc. Just like the notion of feeling like you were using that luxury software is something that definitely helped like the company grow in the earlier, kind of like in the earlier stages.
For sure.
When you were pitching to these clients, did you ever have a point where you were pitching to lower ticket offers?
What is lower ticket? Like as in,
or like you were pitching like cheaper services?
And look, like sometimes you got to do it. Like when you're starting off, like sometimes you got to let them up.
Just say yes.
Yeah, sometimes you got to say yes. But the idea that you want to be really good at one thing. And I think this applies to not only business, but to life in general, to be honest. Like you don't really want to be the guy that's good at decent at everything. You'd rather be the guy that's like the best at this one thing, because people will pay like 10x more to work with you. And so like the same thinking is true in business, right? Which is like, if you're going to be taking on these like smaller things, it kind of takes away energy and time and money from the thing that really matters. And even though it's like small chips, off the table, like it does start adding up. And especially when you're trying to build an agency, right? Like process really matters. And when you're taking on these kind of random side things, process tends to go out the window because there really isn't a process. It's pretty detrimental. But look, in the early days, you gotta do it.
And then what was it like to build out that process in the early days? Once you guys knew that you were focused on a specific target, specific price point, what were the first processes you had to create?
Yeah, I mean, first, like you got to think through the sales process, especially when you're building software. There's a lot that goes into understanding what you're building to be able to quote. And then, so that took actually a good amount of time. And we've experimented even with different pricing models, whether it's fixed pricing, ongoing pricing, sprint pricing, et cetera. And then on the actual process of fulfillment, we have a kickoff call. We scope out the project. We have a project manager that kind of handles that first part. We used to go into a design phase. We don't do that anymore. We can talk about that. And then development. And obviously there's like more nuance to it. But the most important part of it is that you have it documented and you're like incredibly rigorous with how you get your team to, obey to the documents. And it sounds kind of stupid to the level that you need people to follow it. But again, like these things do add up. If you have 10 people that are missing one part in the step, like one small detail, that's already pretty impactful.
How big is your team?
We're about 10 people right now.
And of those 10 people, how many work on, any specific project?
It's about split in half. So 5 on the fulfillment and 5, I would say, they're operations / sales, et cetera.
Why did you mention that you don't do design anymore?
Yeah, so we pivoted to Lovable. I think this has been pretty. I've been pretty outspoken about it. And Lovable's really good at building front ends. I think that's probably the strongest point of it. People will say that's the only thing that's good at. I would disagree, but I think there's kind of like a interesting. I could be wrong here, but this is my take is that I feel like the pendulum on product is actually starting to swing a little bit, where there was an era where design and user experience really mattered. And don't get me wrong, like I love a good product and I think it does matter in a particular use case. But I also think that we've reached this bar of like every product that comes out is like this new level of polish that's like almost overkill at a certain point. I mean, your products like I'm blanking on the particular. There's like a calendar kind of email tool that has like an incredible website. But
Amy?
Yeah, I think it's Amy. Or one of those where it's like you scroll and like it's like fucking takes you through that port. Yeah. And I saw the co-founder talk about how, and I think I responded to him. I'm like, the site's great. Like you can't hate on the art that it is. But at the same time, it kind of takes away from like me trying to focus on the product. And so I kind of feel like the pendulum is starting to swing back on this, where it's like people just want something that works, and they want it. They don't want to pay more for SaaS in particular because people are tired of it. And so it's kind of swinging back to like, okay, used to be like we'll pay for the superhuman of every tool, and I think now it's starting to swing back to now we're going to pay for the the open source version of it, and we don't really care like how beautiful it looks or what animations there are. And so that's why we don't really do design anymore, because I think Lovable passes that threshold of like what is acceptable.
There's definitely more and more talk, especially in San Francisco or like on Twitter in the last year, of like subscription fatigue. And I think even Chamath had talked about launching an agency or like launching a startup whose sole purpose was to, build, exactly. And to play devil's advocate here, it still does start to feel like, Notion Calendar is a good example, or kind of like other software tools where people are still finding new pieces of software to use. If you look at Perplexity or Claude, I think everyone has, most people, a lot of people, especially on Twitter, maybe it's a bubble, have like are paying for all of the different apps. And so do you see like different parts of the market going first?
I don't really know what the category you put it in, but like there's just a set of tools. I think like DocuSign.
I was using Documento.
Yeah, like it's just these tools that like do like a really simple task, and somehow they just like, yeah, and somehow they just like charge you $200 a month for it because you need like maybe you need 3 or 4 people on these tools, and so they just get you there with the usage. But like you're not actually like it's the billing model of SaaS is kind of broken a little bit because like for a tool like DocuSign, I may need to just be able to view documents. I don't need to like I'm not in it every day. My sales team is right, like but like I shouldn't need to pay for the same usage that like somebody's going in and using it every day does. So I think people also want to own these things, which is kind of why what we're doing, right? Which is like now that software has gone so cheap and effective from a being able to build something super quick, it's like the cost differentiator of like paying the annual SaaS fees to just building it, they now make sense. As in like you should just actually build it and own it, and becomes an asset to your business, and you're no longer stuck like holding the bag every month.
What are some of the softwares you guys have abstracted away and built internally?
Notion, which is like our project management tool. Yeah, we built our own like internal tool that's like actually a desktop app on my computer.
No way. What does it look like? How does it work?
It's basically a PWA. It's called a Creme Internal App, and it's pretty clean. I mean, we took what we use in Notion, and then we 20%. The 20%, and we just built it, and then we just pay like I don't know $30 a month to host it, and it does more because the thing about these SaaS tools that I think they'll struggle with too is that you can't really build meaningful AI into it because like you look at all these tools, Notion, I don't know, Google Docs, like any of these like kind of SaaS tools that have attempted to add AI into them.
Jira, Asana, whatever.
Yeah, they're all like super just basic AIs, whether they're just like helping you with writing or helping you with kind of the final step in the process. And the reason is because like they can't build a super complex workflow because like every business is different, right? Like what I want is different than what you'd want. And so building your own tool, now you can just kind of go crazy with that.
I think you've seen that with a lot of AI tools as well, where they're becoming very well known for doing one feature really well and being very specific in who they're targeting, as opposed to like these traditional like suite style of apps where you come to Notion for one document, but now you have all of your management and all of your like docs across your entire company. Compared to now, like if you want to use writing, you'll use Claude instead of using Notion's AI or any.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, kind of jumping back into growth for a second here, when you were talking about going from just using your co-founder's network to get your first clients to then scaling up, what does your sales cycle look like now?
Our sales cycle, or how we get leads?
How you get lead generation? Well,
yeah, we came a long way because the business used to be completely reliant on like Bubble RFPs, and honestly, for the first year of the business, I kind of thought we got lucky, and I kind of thought that it was gonna only a matter of time until somebody would be able to beat us in RFPs or whatever it was, right? And that did happen. Like Bubble really messed up, I think, with their RFP system. It got really competitive. They started kind of bracketing people by location and like number of apps and all this stuff. And so they just really fragmented it. And so like we went from like having from RFPs being like, let's say 80% of our business to like under 5 or 10%. I think now now Bubble RFPs are 0. And it kind of started with like slow transitions. Starting like maybe year 2 or 3, we started doing like Google ads, and that like resulted in like 20-30%. Obviously referrals kind of put another 20-30%. And then kind of like you just kind of start like experimenting with different things. Now it's like mainly organic social, I would say, paid ads and cold email. So now we have like a real like engine. Yeah. Now we're like actually going, and I'm actually like, it kind of, I don't consider myself a marketer. And I think people on Twitter like tend to think I'm like some like marketing guru or some shit. But honestly, like this is stuff I'm just picking up as I go. And, it's actually really cool to see like when the engine actually starts working, and this, like it started to work. And it's pretty cool.
You're 21 years old now, and you've been building this company, I think, since you were 19, 18?
18, yeah.
And so now, I'm sure it feels good to see kind of like a lot of the stuff I'm sure you read about or watched videos on in terms of marketing early on, kind of like get applied in the day-to-day of your companies now.
Yeah. Some of it's just like a matter of time that like you can't predict like the whole Lovable thing, for example, right? Like I kind of had first movers advantage because I've been in the game so long. I can kind of pivot because I had the team, I had the brand. It wasn't a hard pivot to go from being like a no code bubble agency to like an AI Lovable agency, right? And so yeah, that like just being in the game long enough is part like half the equation in my head.
Yeah, definitely. And people say you just got to play the game long enough without burning out mentally or financially. When you look at your like meta ads or your paid acquisition strategy, what channels are you using?
Yeah, like Facebook and Instagram ads is the paid. And
what does your funnel look like?
Pretty basic. I mean, basically just like you run ads and we go to a landing page that has a VSL. They book in to our calendar and, we go from there with discovery call, figure out what they're trying to build. Ideally, one or two more calls to kind of follow up. And yeah, that's basically it.
Did you make those ads in-house or did you use an agency?
All in-house.
All in-house?
All myself, yeah.
Are these videos you're filming like talking headshots or what kind of ads are they?
Yeah. So basically how I've done it, I think it's a pretty easy strategy, which is like you shoot your VSL, video sales layer for anyone that's, and basically you just take it. And by the way, this is actually something that for some people that aren't good at, people that are like don't understand how to like create offers and positioning and stuff like that. I actually think that I've created in the last like 3 months, I've created 4 VSLs. And I have not, up until then, I never created a VSL. And I will say that going through the exercise of creating a VSL, whether I posted it or not, was incredibly helpful when it came to thinking through who I'm selling to, the pain points, how to position it, how to talk about pricing, and just like even just the language you use, right? And, to me, the VSL, as stupid as this sounds, is like the base of what you're marketing, because it's basically like you're trying to explain what you're doing to your customer in like 3 minutes. And so once you have that, I think it sets a really good really good framework for you being able to create ads. And honestly, for us, that's just like literally taking snippets of the VSL, putting it into a vertical format. And
you just took snippets of the VSL and turned it into a vertical format. What was your hooks on some of these VSLs or some of the clips?
And then I do like 10 hook variations.
10 hook variations, calling out people in the audience or like the target audience.
Yeah, I mean, we have 4 different offers, 10 hooks for each. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but yeah, like you're just trying things to see what works. Like calling out, you can call out people. You can be like, you can say the offer right away. And all this stuff is like this stuff is not like rocket science. You know what I mean? Like everyone does it. Like literally just go on Instagram and just scroll.
I think Meta Ads Library is also great. I know Brett Malinowski, whose podcast you've been on too. I had a conversation with him for like an hour when I was at WAP last year about ads. And it really is like the most simple kind of like funnels with like the best offers where you're testing the offer and the angle versus like testing the lighting and the videos and the colors of the website and stuff like that. People generally think about when they're new to creating ads. What about cold emails? What was your strategy there?
We are an agency to handle like the infrastructure because I just didn't really want to deal with that. That's like the biggest pain of cold email, honestly, is just like the infrastructure. And then it took a bit to like really dial in our targeting. I constantly get reminded that you need to niche down. It's basically like my like ultimate like marketing sales like thinking is like you always think that you're like niched enough and then you gotta niche a bit more. So that was like the biggest thing for cold email, which is like we just like it didn't work for the first like 3 months, and then all of a sudden it kind of just started working once we figured out like how to dial in the positioning.
Do you have an example of like what you niche down from to what you niche down to?
Yeah, so like imagine us being like going to a business owner and being like, we're a development. Yeah, okay. I cannot stand my Twitter DMs. I'm sure everyone gets this. Is like you get like hit up by like all these people that are trying to either like sell, I don't know, outreach services or whatever. And they always just like tell you what they do, right? They'll just be like,
I'm a copywriter, I'm a video editor, we're
a copywriter,
designer.
Like, this is we work with these brands, blah, blah, blah. Like, do you want to work with us or some shit?
And then they follow up with the hey bro, the question mark, the just making sure you got this.
Yeah. It's
would
so
love
bad.
to provide value for you.
It's so bad. But like, I mean, you can think about that in the cold email sense. Like that's essentially what we were doing when we started. I mean, not to that like janky level, but like if we're a development agency, you're like, well, we can build anything, right? It's kind of true, but you can't go to somebody and be like, hey, business owner, we're a development agency. So if you ever need to build anything, you let us know. They'll be like, yeah, go fuck yourself. So what you need to do instead is you need to, and this is where the VSL comes in, right? Because it's like the VSL, you're forced to kind of bring pain points out of people. Yeah. So it's like going to a business owner and being like, we can build anything. Like, what do you want? Compared to like really understanding what that business owner's pain points may be. And so if the business is a hair salon or something, well, you can imagine that they're probably, what are some of the tools and stuff that they'd use? Well, they'd use like a booking system, and they'd use like some kind of finance like tool probably to keep track of like, what barbers are making what, and like tips and all that stuff. Like these are things that they need to think about. And so you start kind of getting into the head of what are the pain points that a salon would have. And then you write a cold email being like, hey, salon, we know the issues you face because we work with, hundreds of these salons, and you basically tell them these are the pain points you're probably experiencing. This is how we solve it. And it's just, and you can get like obviously more nuance with it. This is a very kind of high level bad explanation, but the point is that you're now actually talking about something that's relevant to them. And you're now putting the picture of like, oh, that is a problem, right? You can't just feed somebody a cake without them, having a reason to celebrate or being hungry. You can't just you can't force feed people. You need them to be hungry. So.
And so when you say niche down, are you saying like you went from, hey, business owner, or we do development, to, hey, bar, like, reach out to all small businesses that are like in, I don't know, healthcare, like you reached out to like barbershops specifically, or were you niching down to like, okay, we're going to do AI companies that are like Series A? Like what was the niche that you were trying to niche down on?
We went down to, we did like, we started segmenting by different types of service-based businesses. So lawyers, accountants, agencies.
What's the split of your clientele between just like traditional like other AI startups or like other tech startups compared to like more legacy businesses or brick and mortar?
We don't work with any AI companies. We don't work with any startups that are like...
So it's all brick and mortar, like law firms, et cetera?
And startups that are building their first product. You know what I mean? But like,
so MVPs.
But we're not going to work with like an established startup. It doesn't really make sense.
And how do these companies who are building out their idea have funding? Does that mean you're only working with funded startups that need an MVP?
Well, now it's like, so inexpensive that you can just kind of, you have a few $1,000s lying around and you can just be anyone, But
do you take those clients, or do you do you have a minimum on what you'll charge someone?
We used to not, but now we run a 2-week MVP offer where we build an MVP in 2 weeks for $9,500. So it's like anyone that has 10 grand lying around can now build a pretty solid MVP. So we'll take those on because it's just quick, like it's easy cash, and I think it's a good way to kind of build momentum in building with Lovable in particular, until you go because I think we still have a bit to go before Lovable is going to be enterprise ready. That
makes sense. And so when you talked earlier about like making sure you're streamlining your processes across like different types of work, does that mean you're creating different processes for like this new 2-week offer that you created, or is it like similar processes that work across the company, or how does that work?
Yeah. So you have like kind of more niche like processes. Obviously they're slightly different, but I would say there's a general like guideline and rule of how to do things. But yeah, you want to have, obviously, if it's a 2-week timeline, you need to kind of have a process that fits within a 2-week timeline compared to, an enterprise thing. Like it's obviously a bit different.
And then with organic, is it mostly just your Twitter, or how are you getting customers on organic?
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn, podcasts.
So when you do podcasts like this, you end up, usually you go into it with like the assumption that some version or some amount of people that watch it will convert if you're reaching the right audience.
Yeah, I don't think that's why I do them, to be honest, but I do them because I think it's good practice to talk and also to just like say my ideas out loud and see what people think. And also it's just for me, like to like think through these things. It's basically a thought exercise, right? You ask me, you're like my therapist for business right now.
That's funny. Interesting. Have you looked at all into doing YouTube or kind of building out your personal brand more like that?
Yeah, I just posted actually my first Instagram like short form video, but I'm going to be doing YouTube more seriously for sure. I think that there's two things that will matter in the next 10 years, and it's AI and personal brands. And so I'm going to try to be both.
It's also become a lot easier to build a personal brand in that you don't need mass or audience size the way that you did 4 years ago to make a good amount of money. There's like the new meta right now that's been going around for the last year of like the Loom screen recorded kind of videos that are very low, like, you know, low level of production. And you're just talking about results or case studies, and that funnels into, you know, smaller offers, like, you know, a couple $1,000 offers.
I've actually done that exactly. I've done the Looms.
You've done the Looms.
They've actually done well. I had one that it's at like 15,000 views for literally a video I just like screen recorded, didn't do any editing.
And you put that on YouTube?
Yeah, slap.
And how did that do in terms of conversions for you?
I don't know. The thing is, like, even on Twitter and stuff, right? Like, the people that are engaging with my posts aren't necessarily like clients. They're people that are trying to be like me. The people trying to replicate.
Sure, they're people trying to build agencies.
Exactly. So I don't really like do these things with the intent of converting clients, but I think it just happens naturally.
But you're not tracking how you're converting them, or like what percentage or where they're coming from?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, like, every time we have a lead, we obviously ask them what channel they come from. But so we'll track it like from a platform level. But I don't know the exact post they came from or whatever.
Right, of course.
And people sometimes also get confused. You'd be so surprised. I mean, this is a shocking thing on how quickly people will forget where they saw you. It's actually incredible. Like they could see an ad within 20, 30 minutes, be like, I think I saw you from Twitter. People have no idea.
You guys use like post hog attribution links, anything like that? Or it's all just asking clients?
I mean, obviously, like if it goes through an ad, like we can track that through the pixel and stuff. No crazy attribution setup right now.
Do you think that, like, you know, a lot of agencies end up hitting a ceiling at like $100,000 a month? Obviously, you guys broke that, but do you see the ceiling being anywhere like in the $1 million range, or where do you like, what is the limit of clients that you think you could take on at once?
You're saying $1 million a month? I don't think there's a limit with any of these businesses. Like, obviously, there are agencies that, like, Accenture is doing, I don't know, billions of dollars in revenue. Like, so obviously, like, it's possible. Now, it's painful. I think it's more of a question of, like, is it diminishing returns at a certain point? Could the amount of time, energy, resources be put into something that could just grow faster? That's more of a personal question. But, you know, you can take an agency and build the next Deloitte, build the next Accenture. You can do it. Is that what you're trying to do? I'm not really sure. I think the space changes so quickly that it's just like it would be stupid to like be like, this is what I want to do in 5 years. Because you know, like literally 3 months ago I didn't know I was going to be doing Lovable. So, but I would say like I want to definitely take the agency as much as I can, and then I think I'll probably pivot to more like personal branding and like build that up a bit more, and then I'll basically have a platform to kind of, you know, do other things and have more leverage in it. You know, I mean, honestly, like I think Iman has just done a great job moving from an agency to doing the personal brand stuff to obviously now kind of back in the e-commerce / startup / like that would be the playbook that I would probably copy. I'd be curious if you have any thoughts around how when he was doing it, there still weren't as many people making the sit down in front of a camera, highly produced, talk about life, talk about making money, talk about like the self-help version of like starting a business on the internet. I think that like that space is very quickly getting smaller. Even the day in my life as a whatever video, like everyone's seen some version of them now. Like I wonder where the innovation is as far as like what is the thing that you can do differently if you were going down that personal brand route to actually get an audience. Because it'll only get harder, especially now that like companies like WAP are coming out and they're making it easier for people to monetize. So people are all kind of making the same content. Kind of, yeah. I mean, I would probably niche. I'm gonna niche down a bit more, like into what like which is building agencies and Lovable and all this stuff, which is pretty hot. So you know, I'll just continue to probably brand myself as that and see where it goes. I think that you need to start niche and then exactly what Iman did, right? Which is you start really niche. You kind of build up like a little bit of a cult following around that. And you slowly start broadening to the point where people just kind of mess with you for you. And that's when you can kind of go and do like the day in the life stuff because people are like, oh, okay, I think this guy kind of already like, I already know who Jacob is, you know? That makes sense. And so I'm going to ask you the question I ask everyone at the end of the episode, which is like, if we were going to do this podcast again in a year, what would you have wanted to accomplish by then to consider the past year's success? I think there's a really toxic culture around some of this stuff. Frankly, I'm not going to judge my year as a failure or not based on those metrics.
Then what would you judge your year as a failure based on?
Just if I fucking had a good time, if I enjoyed the ride, honestly, like what would you look back on your life?
A year and a half ago, and I got into a car accident a year and a half ago, and I fully thought I was going to die. And I had my moment of like, oh, like I messed up. Like if I died right now, I wouldn't be ready because of a very specific two things. And so now I know going forward that like I need to optimize my life around those two things. They have nothing to do with business, both of them. But I think that like they manifest into the work that I do now as business.
No, exactly. I think those are way more, I don't know what they are, but they sound like they're a little more thoughtful than just like MRR. So people should just enjoy the journey. I think the destination comes with a lot more challenges than people think. I think once you reach whatever goals you've set that you think are going to change your life, that's when the existential crisis comes in. That's when you question your life up until that point. That's when you look at your friends around you and you ask, like, are they with friends for the right reasons? Like, there's a whole new set of challenges. So I just think you should just like enjoy it up until that point.
Until that point, I love it, man. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.